Hey guys, today we're taking a look at another entry in the Student Grade Showdown. This one came from Walmart. Today we're taking a look at the Royal Langnickel Essentials watercolor palette. And this might look very familiar to you. If you guys have been watching the channel for a while, you probably recognize it. Unfortunately, I deleted the footage that I got while I was at Walmart when I bought this. So I referenced footage I don't have, but you really don't need it. You're not missing out on a lot. I found it in the arts and crafts section of the Luling Walmart for around $20. They always seem to have a rotating cast of art supplies available, so your mileage may vary. I will also have links down in the description below to where you can order a comparable version of this, not the Royal Langnickel, but what I think this actually is, down in the description. So make sure you check that description for more. So is this little $20 big box kit worth it? Let's unbox, swatch it, and find out together. It has been a ridiculously long time between me recording the start of this video and me recording this part here. I would say a year, because I think I bought this while I was evacuated for Hurricane Ida. But we are taking a look at the Royal Langnickel Essentials Watercolor Artist Colors Flip Kit today. If you're new here, hi, I'm Becca Hilburn. I'm a watercolor artist and comic artist. I make the comic 7-inch Kara, which you guys can read at 7inchkara.com, or you can order your own copies through the Natto shop at nattosoup.com/shop. And I also moonlight as an art supply reviewer, and I've been doing this big student grade showdown where I have reviewed a bunch of different student grade watercolor products to help you guys save some money by just buying the best instead of suffering through the worst. And this watercolor kit might look familiar. It might look familiar if you watch the channel for a long time, but it might look familiar even if you're new here, because I am pretty sure this is basically just a rebrand of the Superior folding palette in a much more compact form. So this was purchased from Walmart in Luling, Louisiana, so a small town Walmart, for around $20, I believe. It might have been 10. I know there was like a 99 at the end of it, so I'll have to double check. It is being white labeled by Royal Langnickel. They did not produce this. I have reviewed other Royal Langnickel products in the past. I will probably review other Royal Langnickel products in the future. This promises to be highly pigmented, vibrant watercolors. Paint trays pivot for easy access to all colors at once. Portable and easy to use. Use the detachable sponge to remove excess pigment or water. Watercolors dry quickly in the pan for quick cleanup. Colors are transparent and blend easily. Includes 18 colors, a sponge, a mixing tray, and a water brush. They have a Facebook, they have Twitter and Instagram, or you can check them out at royalbrush.com. And of course, these were made in China. For a Walmart white label product, the packaging is very simple. I appreciate that. No disposable clamshell here. You could continue to use the packaging if you wanted to. That tape dot is not going anywhere. So we're gonna quickly slice it with a knife. And now we can unbox our Royal Langnickel Essentials. As promised, here is our water brush. It clips in with a kind of loose little clip here. Here is our removable sponge that is intended for you to scrub your water brush out onto. And then here are our pans of watercolor paint. And then here is our mixing surface. So I am 100% sure this is the Superior folding palette. I've actually reviewed this in a much larger form in the past, and you guys can check out a really quick abbreviated version of that review right here. Here's some original footage from my original Superior folding watercolor fan review. I took it on vacation with me, and while I had a nice stable spot to paint, I still found that it wiggled a lot while I was trying to paint, and I had a hard time getting at all of the colors, even colors that I needed. I also found the mixing surface to be very small for what I needed. Now, don't give up. Stay tuned. We are actually going to still continue to unbox and swatch this palette, even though it is a bit of a repeat, because I have changed how I go about reviewing watercolors. So I want to see if this kind of stands the test of time, if it can stand up to Natosoup Studios' current standards for watercolors. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be swatching on cotton rag paper. We're also going to do what's known as a wet into wet test or a mud test. We are going to be doing some color mixing, both optical and atomic, and I'll explain those more a little bit later on. We're going to compare these to some other watercolors, probably just other superior watercolors, but I will probably also talk about some of the other watercolors that I've seen available at Walmart. Your mileage may vary, and I've donated most of those scents, so I'm either going to grab clips or you're just going to have to use your imagination, because some of them were reviewed a really long time ago when I was only doing the blog. We're also going to talk about some comparable watercolors that you might like better, although I am keeping in mind that these were easily available at a big box store that is common for the majority of Americans, particularly Americans on a budget or younger Americans who might not have their own transportation. That said, if these are indeed the watercolors that I think they are, I think these are going to be the best you are going to be able to buy at a Walmart, and they're already leagues better than the Mondo Llama watercolors that I reviewed from Target. So if this is what I think it is, I'm already going to be able to give you guys somewhat of a thumbs up for these. We are going to start off today's unbox and swatch review by swatching these on our standard, the Blick Studio 100% cotton watercolor paper block. And this is a constant throughout my student grade showdown, and consumables like these, as well as the supplies that I purchased to review, would not be a possibility. I would not be able to do these kinds of reviews without the support of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you guys so much. I use all of the funds from Patreon to support the reviews and the tutorials that I create here on the channel. So if you like what I do and you want to help me continue to do it, you can join me over there. And I also want to thank my partner for his continued support as well. And if you guys want to thank him, in addition, keep an ear out for our upcoming game that we're working on. The Devil's in the Data. I am sure you guys will hear me talk about it here on the channel and over on Twitter. So keep an eye out for that. I think you guys will really enjoy it. While we're swatching these watercolors, I'm going to keep an eye out for several things. One of which is going to be the opacity of these watercolors. And one of the ways I test this is by putting down a black line of alcohol marker. In this instance, it is Copic. These tend to react to watercolors the least, but alcohol marker should be non-water reactive, and it should also be non-resistive to water media, which is something that I've noticed that like acrylic ink resists the wet paint a little bit, so it pushes it off the ink, so you can't really get a clear idea. We're also going to be looking for granulation. We're going to be looking at how the watercolors wash out as we add water. And we're going to be looking for optical brighteners as well as granulation. So I'm going to do this part in time lapse. Now I will say I'm not going to test the water brush just yet. I'm not a fan of water brushes. I do like that they include one. It makes for a very convenient travel package, and it might make this set more accessible to someone who is just starting with watercolor and doesn't yet have a bunch of supplies yet. So I will test it later, but I want to be as fair as possible, so I am going to grab one of my favorite watercolor brushes and use that for our swatches. This little palette has the same basic problem as the regular Superior palette. You really can't open it all the way to access all the paints at the same time. I'm going to swatch these one row at a time, and I'm not going to pre-activate these because Superior watercolors tend to do better if you don't. So I noticed that all the colors activated quickly and required no pre-activation, minus the lighter violet, which would have benefited from more time. And all the colors are fairly saturated. The neutrals feel more natural. There's a good yellow ochre and burnt sienna, and while there isn't a lot of granulation, some brands do granulate more finely than others, and this is pretty typical of Chinese and Japanese watercolors. There's some opacity to the colors, but not necessarily a whole lot that I noticed during the swatch test. And the white is basically useless because it basically has no coverage at all. While there might be some dye in these watercolors, I feel like these are probably very finely milled pigments just based on my experiences with superior watercolors. Now, obviously, there are optical brighteners in here, and the water gets pretty muddy pretty quickly, but that's also pretty normal for inexpensive watercolors like these. We're going to do the lift test a little bit later on once these have had a good chance to dry, but we're going to move on to the color mixing test now. Now, the way I'm going to do this is I am going to, out of our 18 colors, select a few of the colors that best represent the split primary. So our cool yellow, our warm yellow, our cool red, our warm red, our cool blue, our warm blue, to the best of my ability based on the colors that we have here. And I am going to do optical mixing where I lay down a grid of colors going one way, let it dry, and then do those same colors going the other way, as well as atomic mixing where I take two colors and smash them together to make our secondary color. So one thing I noticed is that all of the colors activated relatively quickly with the exception of this purple here. That one would have benefited from some pre-activation. And all of the colors are fairly saturated. There isn't really a whole lot of granulation going on right now, but I do think that's going to become more apparent in the wet into wet test. And I have to admit, I am heavily biased with this set because I have reviewed this set before and I have reviewed a lot of superior watercolors before, and it's pretty much handling par to the course, which means that I am probably biased in favor of this set just based on the positivity of my prior experiences and the fact that I don't think they've changed too much about this palette, minus removing, there used to be pans up here which were basically inaccessible. They removed that so that the palette itself is a little bit easier to use, but it still wibble wobbles a little bit, but not nearly as much as the larger 58 chiclet palettes that they also offer. So this might be a more manageable size for travel, despite not having so many pre-mixed convenience colors. We're going to start by laying down the first line of colors for our optical mixing test. That way it'll give it a chance to dry while we're doing our atomic mixing. I found it relatively easy to find all of our primaries in this set. The mass tone for a lot of the blues is really dark and it can be difficult to judge what these colors are. So if you're going to use these watercolors, you might want to make a map of this. So for our atomic mixing, the first thing I noticed is that the mixing space on this thing is kind of a joke. It's small, it's difficult to access, it's all the way at the back. You definitely can't have all the colors out at the same time, especially if you want to access the mixing area. It's very easy to pollute or muddy the colors. And I noticed that while mixing, we get some granulation with some of the colors, and I was able to mix decent secondary colors, so really no complaints there. For optical mixing, these layer decently well and they create optical blends and they don't reactivate too much. So you are able to layer and glaze these colors and actually get your secondary mixes. I think our initial swatches are sufficiently dry, so I'm gonna switch over to a fairly soft, flat watercolor brush, and we're gonna do the lift test. And this is very straightforward. We don't wanna see no lifting. We don't wanna see all lifting. We wanna see a degree, like varying degrees of liftability, because different pigments are gonna have different properties. Some of them are going to be more staining, some of them are going to be more granulating, and the more granulating pigments are the ones that are more likely to lift up. If we were using a scrubbier brush, we would definitely get more lift. That's why I'm using a soft flat for this one, because we want kind of a normal amount of lift. We're not looking to like abrade the paint. We're just looking to see how easily it lifts up. Now, Schmincke does this test after allowing the paints to dry for at least 24 hours. I do not necessarily have that luxury of time because we've got a lot of tests to do. So I usually let the paints dry pretty much and then come back and lift them. And I feel like this kind of replicates my own real world painting scenarios where I might decide that a color is too dark, or that I want to rework an area, or that I might want to do like a lighter color glaze on top, so I need to lift some of the color. Everything seems to lift kind of the same, which is kind of strange. A little bit strangely, all the colors seemed pretty lifting. In the past, when working with superior watercolors, I felt that this was because I'd over applied the color, that there was too much color piled on the paper, making it easier to remove. But in this instance, I didn't pre-activate the colors, so really we should be seeing more variation in how lifting these are. So this is going to be something that I'm going to have to keep my eye on as we progress. So next I'm going to grab a smaller block of our Blick Studio watercolor paper, and we're going to do our wet into wet test. It's relatively easy to clean the mixing palette. It's plastic, so it is going to be prone to staining. I'm just using a paper towel to wipe it out. It is a little bit more challenging though to get into those crevices, so if you want it really, really clean, it's going to take some elbow grease. I would also recommend you don't put this under running water because you may damage the other paints. So with the wet into wet test, I noticed a little granulation, but not really much. The ultramarine blue is more like a cobalt or a vetiver than a true ultramarine blue. Otherwise, the colors activate quickly, easily, don't really require a lot of pre-activation, minus this one color you saw me struggling with there. In general, they're pretty saturated and they blend into one another fairly nicely. This is a decent little travel student grade watercolor set that could be a great option if you're just getting into watercolor and you want something kind of inexpensive that's going to handle pretty dang well, honestly. I think this little thing punches far above its pay grade, and you guys have heard me talk about other superior watercolors and how much I like them, so really it kind of comes down to finding a form factor that you like. So with the more opaque colors, I noticed that they diffused out cleanly and we didn't get any weird halos like we get with some of the other inexpensive student grade sets we've reviewed here on the channel in the past. While the
Now
colors
that our
did
wet
lighten a
into wet
bit as they
test is
dried,
mostly
which is
dry,
normal for
let's
watercolor,
talk
it
about
wasn't so
comparable
significant
watercolors.
that it was
And I want to
worth
start
commenting
with
on.
other superior watercolors. This little collection here is not indicative of the whole. It's not even indicative of all the superior watercolors that I've reviewed. And I'm going to include relevant snippets because one of the things I like about superior watercolors is they get really kind of weird. And if Royal Langnickel made one good move, other than upping their quality overall, which would be smart, it's that they white labeled from Superior. They could have done so much worse. I don't love this particular format all that much. I personally find it annoying, frustrating to use. I really, as you can see, you can't really access all the colors when it's open like this, let alone all the colors in the mixing palette. That's personal preference. The watercolors themselves are generally really fine. And my favorite kind of superior watercolors are these weird chiclet watercolors. I've reviewed several of their sets. My absolute favorite of the weird chiclet watercolors would be the folding palette here. And this you can find on Amazon. You can also find it on AliExpress. I'll try to remember to have links in the description for you guys. If you use the Amazon links, those are affiliate links, so I do see a little bit of money from that, and you don't have to pay anything extra. That's a great way to affordably help out the channel. AliExpress links are not affiliate links, but you're free to use either. I usually will go with whoever has the best prices or whoever even just carries it. What I like a lot of things about this set. I like the color selection. I like the way they laid out the colors. I like how all the colors are legitimately accessible. This does take up a little bit less space than this, but you can actually access all the colors. I even like that these are in these weird repositionable pans. So like if you wanted to make different color families or color themes or whatever based on your needs, this palette would accommodate that. The mixing space is still really small. It's a little bit bigger than this one, but it's not much. I find it just to be more usable. As you guys can see, I never really use the washable sponges. They just don't do it for me. And frankly, there we go. Now I have more mixing space. This has 58 colors as opposed to 18. This varies in price. Let's say it's 30 for the time being. And much like this one, you can't fold it until it's dry because otherwise you will pollute your paints. But otherwise, I really, really like this palette. I have fun with this palette. I have painted things that I like with this palette, which is, when you're reviewing art supplies, that's high praise. So I really like their chiclet style. Now they have another chiclet style one, the weird watch thing that I reviewed. I'm gonna include a snippet of that here, but also check the description below. There'll be links in case you guys are curious about those other superior watercolors. You guys will probably see me reference this weird little watercolor watch a lot. I happen to just really like it. I think it's a lot of fun. I'm really glad Superior released it. If you see it from like Jane Davenport or Jury's, it's really a white labeling of the Superior. Feel free to get whichever version you happen to like the most. I like that the little chiclets, you can move them around, you can replace them. This thing is just a lot of fun. Now, the Color Cool set that you guys see here, same paints, they handle about the same. What I don't like about this set is entirely the format. I think it's just really awkward. It takes up a lot of space. It's just not as fun to use as the watch we just looked at. I would say the folding fan palette is actually a little bit better in terms of format than this one, but I still want to commend Superior for taking risks and doing weird things with their watercolors because it makes it more fun. Now, we do get more colors in this set. I think it's a 60 color set. We get some neons and we get some metallics. They're not great. They're not really worth commenting on. And what I don't really like about this set is the pictures showed that the chiclets could be replaced and removed, kind of like with the watch. They are not, with the exception of the neons and the metallics. And that was what I was really excited about it, was that I thought I could create like color themed palettes and access them at different times. Unfortunately, that is not the case with this palette. So I didn't really enjoy this palette at all. I don't like about that palette is just the format just does not do it for me. And the paint chiclets, much like with the folding fan, are just not repositionable. And I was really hoping they would be, because that would have made it way more enjoyable for me. Another commonly seen and oft white labeled superior format, and in this instance we're looking at it as an Artify watercolor palette, but if you watched my Amy Tangerine review, you saw it then too. It's, oh, and Shapiro Farben white labels it in this format for their 48, I believe, palette as well. So they do have half pans. These come in kind of an interesting cartridge system that are a little bit smaller than standard half pans, and they are repositionable, which is really nice. Otherwise, this is a very straightforward watercolor palette. Not a lot, you know, new, innovating, or exciting about it, but definitely workable as a palette. And then finally, we have their master level. This is who I think Etcher is white labeling their watercolors from. And it does perform a bit better than this plastic palette here. But what I like about Superior is that you get decent quality watercolors in a weird format. And y'all, this is very normal. This is very normal. So one of the things that Daler-Rowney brags about is that they are highly pigmented, vibrant watercolors. That's true for a lot of watercolor sets. The paint trays pivot for easy access to all colors at once. Any standard watercolor palette will allow for that. Portable and easy to use. This is also portable and easy to use. Detachable sponge to remove excess pigment or water. Well, this doesn't come with a sponge, and it also doesn't come with a water brush. This also has transparent and blendable colors, and I think this is the 48 half pan set. And I got this one on AliExpress, and I'll link that for you guys. But it's okay. My complaint is like, it's just kind of boring compared to the weird folding palette. So Superior makes a lot of interesting watercolor supplies. They are also a popular company to white label from, so you've probably used, if you use a lot of art supplies and a lot of watercolor, you've probably used some Superior products without knowing it. So if you want to get them from the source, I'll have links in the description to where you can order them on AliExpress. Since I mentioned it, I did want to pull out the Amy Tangerine palette really quick. It uses the half pan, middle of the road Superior watercolors, but a totally different palette. I actually find the build quality of this to be really kind of underwhelming. The cartridges are fine, like the paint part is fine. Everything else is just kind of very eh. And this was about $20. I think it was $17.99 on Zulily, but it goes for $25 if you buy it on the Amy Tangerine site or the American Crafts site or on Amazon, or if you get it at Joann's. The only other Royal Langnickel products that I've reviewed have been the simply atrocious Royal Langnickel watercolor brushes that I got at Walmart. That's an older review that's over on the blog, but I do have a link down in the description. I also have this gigantic 80-piece art set Royal Langnickel Artist Premier Set painting chest, because every year I review a few art kits as just part of like my Christmas preparations, because these kind of art kits are a really popular choice as gifts for people who are buying for artists or people who are interested in art. I did not get a chance to review that last year, so I am going to review it as part of my Christmas extravaganza for this year. So hopefully we can learn a little bit more and get a little bit more experience with Royal Langnickel products reviewing this chest. We should really get kind of like an all-in-one, right? Because it comes with Essentials oil paints, Essentials acrylic paints, Essentials watercolor paints, watercolor cakes, brushes, more brushes, palette knives, 3 guide booklets, which is great because I don't know anything about oil, 2 graphite pencils, 1 brush holder rack, a rectangular wooden palette, linseed oil, a sharpener, a white eraser, and an artist's chest. So look forward to that. While I haven't reviewed a lot of Royal Langnickel, I have reviewed a fair amount of Daler-Rowney stuff. I reviewed their tubes over on the blog. Spoiler, I hated them. They were awful. I reviewed their Simply Watercolor cakes, which I did that on YouTube, so I will include a snippet. I also reviewed their Aquafine watercolors, which I did here on YouTube, so I will include a snippet of that as well. Both Daler-Rowney and Royal Langnickel are pretty commonly sold at Walmart, so I think it's a pretty fair comparison. Of the two, I would definitively recommend this white labeled little palette over what I've reviewed from Daler-Rowney, but that might just be my personal opinion. I reviewed this little Daler-Rowney Aquafine watercolor set a while back. I have never seen this set sold at Walmart. I think I purchased this from David's. At the time, I was really not that impressed. I think I still have it. So if you guys are interested, I might be willing to give it some art supply redemption, because watching this old footage, I have totally changed how I handle watercolor reviews, and maybe it might be better. It actually reminds me a lot though of the Montmartre watercolor set that I reviewed a while back. So if you guys are interested in it, I might be willing to do a head-to-head comparison. You guys will have to let me know though down in the comments below. Give me some shout outs and maybe I'll revisit it. But I really just wasn't that happy or that impressed with it, and I think today's palette is better. Let's talk about watercolors from other big box stores. We will start with the Mondo Llama palette from Target because I happen to have it to hand. The other palettes I've either repurposed or I've given them away. I hated this palette. I think this palette is garbage. Do not buy this palette. This palette is already so much better than this palette here. If you're going to get one or the other, get this palette, not this palette. This palette is terrible. If I can save someone that money and save someone that frustration, I am happy to do so. So another example of a big box store watercolor palette would be the Hobby Lobby Master's Touch watercolors. I reviewed them here on YouTube. I do not endorse Hobby Lobby. I do not support Hobby Lobby. I was given a gift card, so that money was already spent on the gift card, and I didn't want Hobby Lobby to get something for nothing. So I used that to buy some art supplies to review for you guys, so I could tell you guys not to buy those art supplies and to try not to shop at Hobby Lobby if you have other options. Obviously, Hobby Lobby is very popular in the South, and many areas have a Hobby Lobby and they don't have a Michael's, or they don't have, you know, their own art supply store. So I want art supplies to be accessible to as many people as possible, but I do not endorse or support Hobby Lobby. And I just wanted to make that really clear. I don't like their politics. I don't like how they treat people, and I don't like how they steal artifacts from other countries. So make of that what you will. But I'm going to include a clip from the Master's Touch watercolor review, and you guys can see why I do not like them. So these are Master's Touch watercolors from Hobby Lobby. It's actually a set. I picked it up with a gift card. Hobby Lobby aside, I still don't like these. I don't like the quality of them. I think they are poor quality and not particularly fun to paint with. And I'm including them because they are from a big box art supply supplier that a lot of people are familiar with. I cannot recommend them. I was not impressed with the color intensity of them. They're very, very weak, and they're just not fun to paint with. They're kind of unpleasant to work with, actually. I really think these companies are really leaning heavily on the fact that it comes in a wooden gift box, and they think that's going to impress people, and it does impress people, which is a shame because that money should go into actually making better watercolors than including them in a wooden box. So these are a big old pass for me. I have also reviewed a fair amount of watercolors from Dollar Tree, Dollar General, and Five Below over the years, and while they are incredibly cheap, most of them are also incredibly bad. So I will include some snippets just to give you guys an idea, as well as links to the full reviews or the live streams where I compared several of them against one another, but just take it from me, they're not worth the money you're spending on them, even if it's only $1. I've reviewed a lot of art supplies from Five Below over the past couple years, and some of them are a hit and some of them are a miss. I want to talk about the tube palette and then the cake palette. Both of these are a big pass for me. I explain why in the full video, but they are terrible watercolors. They are not worth your $5. They are not worth your $3 something. They're really bad. They're not going to handle at all like what you might think they ought to handle. And in my opinion, you can do better just treating Crayola super tips like watercolor markers than what you're going to get from these two particular sets. Now, not everything at Five Below is terrible. It is really kind of hit or miss, and you either should watch reviews or roll the dice, but those two sets are a big old miss for me, and I would recommend that you just go ahead and skip them.
Somewhat recently, I reviewed the Artist Loft half pans, which are a white label from Pabio. I have since repurposed that tin to hold something else. So while I can grab the tin and show you guys the tin, I can't grab the watercolors. So I will include a snippet so you guys can get an idea of what those watercolors look like. So here is the tin, and one of the big things this set is prized for is how compact it is. I gotta say, the paints inside are garbage. I really don't like them. However, I don't want to fold this up completely because it is still drying, and if you do that, it gets on the backs of the paints. But I dare say, even though they're different sizes, they're both pretty compact, and something this size would slip into my purse a lot more easily than something this size. Of course, nothing's going in my pockets because women's pockets can't even hold a credit card, let alone a watercolor palette. So I did not enjoy the Artist Loft watercolors. I don't enjoy Pabio watercolors, and I would recommend you go with this set over this set. Also in the lineup and also not shown are the Arteza watercolors. I reviewed a lot of Arteza, especially last year, and I really do not like their tubes, and I really do not like their half pans, and I think they are both awful, and I think they are both overpriced for what you're getting. So if you are faced with the decision of Arteza or these here, I would recommend you just go ahead and you go with these here. And of course, the Paul Rubens, the Mei Liang pigments, the Aowen palette, those are all great. It's hard for me to say which I prefer over superior watercolors because it often just comes down to like the nuances of those individual palettes. So that is definitely a your mileage may vary sort of situation. On Amazon, you can often find the Mei Liang pigments for cheaper or under $20. So this might be an instance of whatever is cheap. But I am doing this portion of the Student Grade Showdown from big box stores because I recognize that a lot of people can't order online for whatever reason. They might not have a debit card due to debt problems. They might not have a debit card because they just don't have a debit card. They might not have any credit cards. They might have a problem with overspending online. They might not be allowed to do online shopping. They might have been given a gift card. They might have been given cash. I definitely understand that some people cannot do online shopping for whatever reason. So I wanted to try to accommodate that and do some store accessible watercolors as well, especially big box, very common stores like Walmart, which unfortunately has pushed out a lot of the mom and pop smaller shops from a lot of areas, and it might be your one source for just about everything. That said, this little palette is not bad at all for what it is, and you could definitely do worse with other watercolors at Walmart. This is the best by a long shot watercolor palette I've reviewed from Walmart, at least the Walmart that I historically have had access to, the Walmart in Luling, Louisiana, which is a small semi-rural community. I would be remiss if I didn't go ahead and test out their water brush. So I am going to go ahead and fill it with tap water. It doesn't come with one of those little plugs, but in this instance it makes sense because it comes with a holster here and they're kind of meant to be carried together. I have found with my other flip palette like this that it doesn't do a very good job of holding the water brush in securely. So you may want to rubber band it, and if you rubber band it, you can get 2 water brushes in there. That said, if you can Dremel this thing off, you could just rubber band your water brush to the side regardless, and it would save some space. So this is a really standard superior water brush. They're all basically the same. I've seen like a dozen of them. They're
a very common free pack-in with Superior products. The water brush looks like it is a larger tip, and it has a stiffening agent in the bristles. So when I go to fill this with water, I will also rinse that out. I have to say, I'm not really a big fan of water brushes. I'm glad that they did include one. It makes this palette more accessible as a travel palette and as a palette for someone who might not have other watercolor supplies. I just don't like them. They are prone to leaking for me. I have a lot of trouble with water control with these. I have trouble doing washes. I have trouble mixing colors. They're just a pain in the butt, in my opinion. So we're just gonna grab some color. It activates fairly readily. We can do thick lines and thin lines, which is more important than you would think. With a little bit of pressure, we can do a half passable gradiated wash. The scrubbing sponge is so dense. It does an okay job scrubbing, but it doesn't really do an okay job holding the water to help you scrub. So that's not, I mean, I would use a paper towel if I wanted to use a water brush with this. Usually I would not use the sponge at all, but I do want to demonstrate it for you guys. Something I don't like about this palette is we don't get like a light cool yellow. We could have gotten rid of that white and had a light cool yellow instead. I feel like this would be fine for plein air sketching. This palette doesn't wobble as much as its larger version does. It's a little bit more stable, and that was something I really did not like about the other palette. You do need to let this palette dry fully before you put it away because the paints are going to get all over themselves and all over each other. But that is also fairly common for little travel palettes, so I can't say it's like the worst thing. This could be really fun for like sketchbook painting, or if you are always on the go, whether you're going to school or you're trying to get some stuff done in your classes, or you're going from like dorm to home or what have you. This palette is compact enough and breaks down small enough that it would work well for that. But honestly, most watercolor palettes would fit that bill, so this is not that impressive. In fact, a regular little half pan palette like this can hold, I believe it holds 7 across, so that's 14, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 plus 14 is 20, so you can get 2 more colors in a standard little palette like this than you can in a little palette like this. So this is probably about as compact. It's just some food for thought. Generally, I review art supplies on the criteria listed on the box. If they brag about doing X, Y, and Z, I'm going to compare it against other watercolor brands that do those same things. Because I really want to help you guys find the art supplies that are right for you. And I feel like you can genuinely save money if you do a little bit of research and you find something that makes you happy rather than buying something that's immediately in front of you that you might not like. Of course, as someone with ADHD, that impulsivity is a hard one to contend with. I would imagine I can rinse this off in the sink. Let's do a fakey blue sky wash. It's fine. It's fine for sketching. It would probably be fine for in your sketchbook. I would recommend, if you want to do watercolor sketches, that you use a watercolor sketchbook for that, or at least a good mixed media sketchbook. One of the ones I really like is the Canson XL watercolor sketchbook because it's cheap and it can take watercolor decently well, which, believe it or not all mixed media or watercolor sketchbooks are capable of doing that. So I am going to rinse this nasty little sponge off in the sink, and we'll talk about the pros and cons and the final verdict. The sponge actually washed off very cleanly. If I were doing plein air, I would let this dry out like in the sun before I pack this away in like an airtight container or somewhere where the sponge might mildew. So that's just some food for thought. Let's talk about the pros and cons of the Royal Langnickel, aka Superior watercolor palette purchased at Walmart. And we're going to start with the pros. So generally, I really like Superior watercolors. I think you could do a lot worse than a white labeled Superior product, and I'm generally very happy with their student grade line. This is one of the brands that really kind of changed my thoughts on student grade watercolors and what I could expect from student grade watercolors. And the fact that even though it's white labeled, you can get them at Walmart is great. Walmart, while it is a giant behemoth of a big box store that's put a lot of smaller businesses out of business, in reality, it's where most of us buy our first art supplies. It's definitely where I bought my first art supplies and where I continue to buy most of my art supplies for my teenage years, because I just didn't have the money or the access to buy art supplies online, or the opportunity and the money to buy them at my local brick and mortar art supply shops, David's and Dixie, all that often. So Walmart is where a lot of people get access to things that they might not otherwise have access to in their small town. So I really like that they are carrying a Superior product, even if it's under a different name. And I hope this is doing well enough for Royal Langnickel that they will continue to offer it, because frankly, from what I've seen of their brushes, their other products are not so great, and this was actually a very wise choice on their part. In fact, I think this was the last one that Walmart had at the time I bought it, so hopefully other people have given it a shot, because if Walmart's what you got and you don't have access to other things, this is going to be the best you're going to find at Walmart. And I don't actually know if Walmart still carries Canson XL, but they did for a long time. I think they might be carrying Grumbacher watercolor paper now, which I have mixed feelings about. I haven't had a chance to really fully do like a big illustration on a full sheet of paper with it, but I did get one of their samples and I had fun painting on the sample that I had. So this plus a Grumbacher watercolor pad might not be a bad way to start using watercolor and to be introduced to watercolor. So some of my other field tests with Superior watercolors would be relatively you could use that and work with these. So that could also be something fun that you could do. Those are two really big pros. I'm trying to think of some other pros. The water brush is fine. The sponge cleans off easily. Overwhelmingly, I'm going to list more cons, but I like this palette. I think this is a good little palette. So don't let the long list of cons deter you. They're just something to keep in mind. So my cons are, this format just doesn't work for me. I have trouble accessing all of the colors I mean, it's not even open all the way right now. I have trouble accessing all the colors and the included mixing surface. I would rather they didn't include the water brush holder and we could just rubber band the water brush on, or if it just had like a little elastic loop, that would work a lot better, because this doesn't do a great job of holding your brush in securely, and if you have a bag full of other things, the brush could get lost very easily. I'm not a fan of these kind of like sponges to wipe off your water brushes. I would rather this have been left blank and it could be a small mixing surface. The reason we can't really do that here is it's got Velcro on it, and that's just going to leave a sticky residue that I don't feel like fighting with. But if you feel like fighting with it, more power to you. I also think the inclusion of a white is a waste of space. I would have preferred a cool yellow, because that white ain't doing nothing. It doesn't have much tinting power. I would also like to see more granulation in the paints that they did include, although their color choices minus the white are not bad color choices. I mean, realistically, since we have such limited space, we really don't need basically 3 oranges as well as a warm yellow. We could have maybe just 1 orange and a different color. We definitely did not need that white. Our greens and blues are kind of weak. This isn't really a good ultramarine. It's more like a cobalt blue. So having like a darker ultramarine blue would be a big help. Or maybe including a sepia tone or a Payne's gray would be helpful as well. Their reds and purples are pretty much fine. I really just need 2 reds. I need a cooler red and a warmer red. So this color gamut does give you more mixing potential, but we really don't need all the warm yellows and oranges, because Orange is an incredibly easy color to mix, even in a very small palette like this. And the fact that we don't really have a good ultramarine also kind of limits the kind of greens that we can paint. I also would love it if we could reposition the chiclets, or if the chiclets were replaceable, like if you could order refills. It still does not seem like you can do that. So, you know, that's kind of a bummer. When it runs out, good luck finding a refill. And I know the stubborn among you are like, Becca, you could refill it from a tube and then smooth it out. And if you're going to do that, I say more power to you, because it's either going to be sticky, or it's going to crack, or it's going to dry at a different rate from everything else. But if you want to do that, go for it. I am not going to stop you. What is my verdict on the Royal Langnickel's Essentials 18 color watercolor palette, white labeled from Superior? The fact that Walmart is carrying this makes me really happy. This isn't a bad set at all. And if you're new to watercolor, or you're exploring watercolor, this could be a great and affordable place to start. It is about $20. You can get it or similar palettes cheaper online. But as we talked about, not everybody has the option to do their shopping online. And I feel like this could be a great option for teenagers, or for people who don't have access to a debit or a credit card, to really be able to affordably start to explore watercolor. You could do a lot worse than this little palette here, and I'm really glad that Walmart is carrying it. In general, I really like Superior watercolors. They're weird, they're wild, they're wonderful, and they have no fear when it comes to weird formats, and I want to encourage them. If any Superior reps are watching this, please continue to be playful and innovative, because there are definitely people who do appreciate that. It is a Chinese company, so I kind of doubt that they're watching what little old me has to say, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. And if anyone from Royal Langnickel is watching, and I also doubt that, but I'll throw that out there as well, if you want to white label more Superior products, I think you'll be able to find an audience for them, because it is definitely an upgrade over what you carried in the past. So all in all, I like this palette. I like it better than the Pabio/Artist Loft palette. I like it better. Well, it's about on par with the Amy Tangerine palette, because these are just Superior watercolors also. I like it way better than the Mondo Llama palette, and I think you guys would be pretty satisfied with the price and the functionality of this little palette, minus a few little peccadillos that I think you could get used to and eventually overcome. Honestly, I was kind of impressed. These are definitely the Superior watercolors, and as you guys know, I do like the Superior watercolors, and I do think they are worth your money. Are they worth $20? You can get a bigger version of this on Amazon for the same price, so maybe not this kit unless you need to get it from Walmart for whatever reason. But of what I have reviewed from these big box stores and what I have seen from Walmart over the years, this is the best watercolor set they have offered by a long shot. So it did pretty well when it came to our color swatches. Colors are bright, vibrant, and saturated. They were also easy to mix. I could also use the included water brush for various watercolor techniques. Is it going to handle as well as a regular watercolor brush? No, but this format is a little bit more compact and a little bit more portable, so the water brush is kind of a nod to that, and I appreciate them including it. It also did fairly well in our wet into wet test. I did not see any strange haloing. Some of the colors did granulate once you added sufficient water, and just all in all, it handles like a Superior watercolor palette. So it handles pretty comparable to the other Superior palettes on the market. I'm working on wrapping up my student grade showdown. I have been working on this showdown for about a year, a little longer than a year. I still have a few more I want to review, but by and large, we've mostly covered our bases. We have found some winners. We have found some horrible losers. Hopefully I've helped you guys find watercolor supplies that will make you happy and will enable you to start your watercolor journey. If you're looking to begin watercolor and you found me because you were searching for watercolor stuff, I have loads of easy and fun watercolor tutorials that I will link down in the description below for you guys. I hope you guys will check those playlists out. And then as you become more advanced, I also have art and chat tutorials that are more meant to inspire you rather than just step by step, we do it this, then
this, then this, then this. So hopefully you guys will check them out. They will be in the cards as well as down in the description below. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Becca Hilburn. I'm a watercolor comic artist and illustrator. I make the webcomic 7-inch Kara. I'd love to tell you about Kara here.
If you enjoy watercolor, cottagecore, and Kiki's delivery service, I think you'll really like my comic 7-inch Kara. It follows the adventures of a 7-inch tall girl named Kara who sets out on a big adventure, riding kittens and meeting humans along the way. The first 2 volumes are available in print, or you can read it at 7inchkara.com. But either way, I hope you guys will check it out.
You can read 7-inch Kara as a webcomic at 7inchkara.com, or you can purchase your own copies, perfect as a Christmas gift. Christmas is coming up, through the Natto shop at nattosoup.com/shop. I even have a 2-book bundle, so if you buy both, you'll save some money. And by ordering it directly from my shop, I can customize it for you. So if you would like to have the book dedicated either for yourself or to give as a gift, make sure you let me know in the comments. But not only does this allow you to give the gift of comics this year, but it allows you to support a small business, and it really, really means the world to me. So hopefully you guys will check 7-inch Kara out. If you like my art, I would also love it if you would join me on these social networks. I share art to Twitter and Instagram pretty regularly, and I'm always posting new stuff to TikTok, so hopefully you guys will add me over there. I hope today's review was helpful, useful, and informative. If I helped you guys save some money, or if I've pointed you in a helpful direction, maybe towards a watercolor kit that you'll really enjoy, one way that you can say thanks is by leaving me a big old thumbs up. If you want to help me continue to do these kind of art supply reviews and tutorials, you can also help fund their creation by joining me over on Patreon at patreon.com/nattosoup. It's with the help and support of my patrons that I'm able to afford to purchase supplies like this to review for you guys. So huge thank you for all that you guys do. It really means a lot to me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. If you liked what you saw here and you're not yet a subscriber, it'd really mean a lot to me if you click the subscribe button and the bell notification and join me here on YouTube. And hopefully I'll see you guys again really soon with another art supply review or tutorial. Bye!